Remember, the devil doesn't have to come when you ask. It can come when it wants to destroy you. He says there's things that happen in this world that he said would stop your heart, is how he said it to me. My name is Tony Spera. I'm the director of the New England Society for Psychic Research, and that was started back in 1952 by Ed Warren and Lorraine Warren, psychic researchers. Well, you know, when I was growing up, I grew up in a very strict Italian family household. And we didn't talk about things like the paranormal. We didn't talk about ghosts. We didn't talk about devils or demons. You know, we went to church. The only spirits that I knew about were the ones you pray to. My whole thing started when I was a police officer back in 1979. I was sitting in an industrial park looking out at the roadway. I was doing a police report. And I'm doing the police report. I just happened to glance up towards the road, and there I see a brown station wagon. They call them station wagons back then. A brown station wagon driving by the roadway with a beautiful looking woman in it. And she smiled. I could see her face perfectly. She smiled and gave me one of these. I'm like that. And she goes by. 5 minutes later, another police officer calls me on the radio to meet him. And he says, "Hey, were you looking, did a girl drive by in a brown wagon and wave at you?" I'm like, you know, how does he know? I go, yeah, she did. He goes, "She was looking for me. She's a friend of mine." I go, "Oh, okay." He said, "Do you want to meet her?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to meet her." He goes, "Don't worry, I'll set it up for you." And he introduced me, and she introduced herself as Judy. And I started dating her. I asked her out on a date, and she said yes. And about 3 weeks into my dating with Judy, she says to me, "Hey, Tone, you want to go see my parents lecture at University of Connecticut?" And I looked at her, I said, "What do you mean?" She goes, "Yeah, they're lecturing at Jorgensen Auditorium." I said, "What are they, college professors or what?" She goes, "No." She started laughing. No, they're not college, they're ghost hunters. They're the psychic researchers, Ed and Lorraine Warren. Have you ever heard of them? I said, "Yeah, I did. I've heard of them, but you know, just in passing, kind of, I knew the name." She goes, "Yeah, let's go." So we went, and that's when I first met Ed and Lorraine. They were very nice. Lorraine was dressed in a nice kilt and a white blouse, and with her hair pulled up. And Ed was sitting there looking through his slides, trying to find out what slides he was going to use. And so we watched the presentation, Judy and I. And I was so astounded by the stuff I was listening to from Ed. I couldn't believe it, because I never saw like ghost images and talking about devils and demons. And that's what Ed was doing. He was talking about devils and demons. So that got me really intrigued. And then after that, you know, I'd go over the house and learn more from Ed and Lorraine, because they'd always be talking about a case. And then Ed brought me down to the museum to see it, which we're in the museum right now. And I started to work with them as far as helping them out on their lectures. I used to run the equipment. And then at one point I said, "Ed, when am I gonna, you know, go on a case with you?" He finally said, "You're ready, kid." And he used to call me kid. "You're ready, kid. You can come on cases." So the first actual paranormal or supernatural event that happened was when it was about 1981, when Ed and Lorraine called up and it said to Judy, "Hey, we're going to England. You guys want to come?" Sounds good to me. So we got our passports. We went to England. We landed at Heathrow Airport. We're sound asleep in our beds at this B&B and banging on the door. It's Ed. It's like about, I don't know, 12 o'clock at night, maybe 12:30. Banging on my door, and we wake up out of a sound sleep. He's like, "Come on, we're going." And he says, "Make sure you bring your camera with you and your tripod." I had a little tripod that you extend out. And back then there was no video. It was all 35mm film. And he had a cassette recorder. So we get in the car, we drive to Whitby. We get there, and it's the ruins of an abbey that's on the North Sea. And he says to me, "Set up that camera over there." I'm setting up the camera. Ed's off maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 yards away, and he's got a cassette recorder. He's fiddling with it. As I'm setting up the recorder, putting it on the tripod, I get it all attached. I sense something. I turn around like this, and there's this black mass, probably about 6 feet tall, darker than the night. And the night was dark. I mean, the night was black, but this thing was blacker, so I could see it. Almost immediately, I felt like I had to fall down. And my knees got weak. I went to the ground. I remember I'm 30 years old. I fall down on the ground, and now I'm scared, and I'm trying to yell out. Finally, I was able to just get out a few words like, "Help, help." Ed heard me. I didn't know he heard me, but I thought, this is it. I'm looking at the ground, you know what I mean? I'm holding my hands like this, and I could hear something coming. I didn't know what it was. And then I heard a yelling sound. It was Ed. What he did was he ran towards this thing because he could see this black mass just as well as I could. And he had holy water in his hand in like a plastic bottle. And he's going like this with it, right? And he's yelling, "In the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave and go back to where you came from. In the name of Jesus Christ," over and over. This thing goes, gone. There's nothing there anymore. And Ed grabs my arm. He goes, "You all right? You all right?" I go, and I went, "What the hell is that? What the hell was that, Ed?" And he gets me off my feet. And he goes, "Come on, I'm going to walk you to the car. You sit in the back seat." He walks me to the car, and he goes, "That was demonic." So I'm like, sitting in the car. He goes, "We're not going to do any investigation or anything tonight. We're going to leave." So he gathered up Judy and Lorraine. They got in the car. We went home. I was shaking like almost all the way home. Ed and Lorraine were psychic researchers before they even started the foundation. They went on a lot of cases right after Ed got out of the Navy. On his 17th birthday, Ed Warren joined the U.S. Navy during World War II. And he told Lorraine, because he'd already been dating Lorraine, he said, "Lorraine, when I get out of the Navy, I want to find out if other people have had haunting phenomena happen to them, such as happened to me in that house in Bridgeport." He lived in a house in Bridgeport, Connecticut on Jane Street from 5 years old to 12 years old, and he experienced a lot of ghostly and scary phenomena. So he would read these magazines after he got out of the Navy. Fate magazine was one of them. And he would read these articles about various haunted places. So they would go out and drive to these places that Ed read about. And he would take a sketch pad with him and a pencil. He'd pull up to the haunted place that he read about, take about 30 minutes to sketch the outside of the house, and then he'd hand the sketch to Lorraine, say, "Lorraine, go up, knock on the door. Whoever answers, tell him that your husband, out in the car, made a nice sketch of your house. He wants you to have it. Maybe that'll get us in the house. Maybe they'll invite us in." And that's what she did. She would say, "My husband's in the car there, and he loved your house. He wanted to take a sketch of it. Here it is." And say, "Well, have him come up. I want to thank him." Then when he got in the house, he would say, "Hey, I heard you had a problem here. I read about something about your house. What's going on?" That's how he'd start to learn. That's how they began. The Parent investigation was in Harrisville, Rhode Island, about 1973. It started out with Carolyn Perrin being attacked in different ways. She was hit with a coat hanger when she went into the closet. One time, Carolyn was sitting at her chair. She had an orange. Now, you know oranges don't bleed blood, right? But she cuts open the orange, and blood, rich red blood, starts to come out of the orange and falls onto her shoe. She's out in the garden one time, and something pushed her onto a tomato stake and impaled her. She was in her bedroom one time, and she heard and saw this image of this old hag. It looked like her head was detached from her body and hanging on her shoulder, and a voice echoed through to Carolyn saying, "I would drive you mad with death and gloom. I would drive you mad with death and gloom." These two gentlemen who were into the paranormal, Carl and Keith, called Ed and Lorraine in. They knew Ed and Lorraine. They said, "We got a case in Harrisville, Rhode Island. That's pretty bad, Ed." When Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived at the Harrisville house, they did an interview. They did a seance there too, I believe. But Lorraine felt that there was definitely something there in the house. I remember Lorraine said she walked up a flight of stairs, and as soon as she got to the top, she could feel it. Lorraine immediately said to Ed, "There's something dark here." At one point, Roger got very upset with Ed because the way his wife was acting at the table, like they were getting to the core of what was wrong. And at one point, Roger stopped the whole investigation, told them to leave, and they did leave. And I believe they didn't really resolve anything that in that case. In other words, I think things still happened in that case that were unresolved. So it was one of those cases that, even though the movie shows it one way, you got to remember the movies are done for entertainment purposes. The Brookfield case was pretty wild in itself. There was a book written about it called The Devil in Connecticut by Gerald Brittle. David Glotzel, 11-year-old boy, was possessed by a demonic entity in that house. Things were happening in that house that were indescribable. David would be regularly attacked. He would levitate. He would feel something grabbing him, pushing him down the stairs, pushing him around. He would see a hand come up through the bed. He had a creature, a dinosaur creature, plastic, that glided across the carpet and said, "You are all going to die." Arnie Johnson, whose girlfriend was Debbie Glotzel, David's sister, Debbie. And he used to stay at the house quite a lot and got to really be friendly with everybody, like a family member almost. And he really liked David. Arnie was getting to the point where he was really getting angry that this thing kept attacking an 11-year-old boy, his friend, David. And at one point, Arnie made a mistake. He was standing in the middle of the living room, and he was so fed up with what David was going through that he yelled out, "Stop it. Don't bother him. I'm a man. Come to me. Take me on." Nothing at that moment happened at all to Arnie Johnson. But he was in the backyard or in the back near the kennel where Alan Bono owned a kennel. And Debbie Glotzel worked for Alan Bono. He said he was standing in the backyard with Alan Bono when suddenly he must have blacked out. He remembers standing there, then he remembered just waking up. And when he woke up, he was in custody, in handcuffs, by the Brookfield Police Department. What happened was he stabbed Alan Bono and killed him. Ed and Lorraine said, "We know what happened. We know that demonic influence came to Arnie when he challenged it." Remember, the devil doesn't have to come when you ask or challenge. If you said, "Come to me now," it doesn't have to come now. It doesn't have to listen to you. It has the wisdom of the ages. It's not, something that's never walked the earth in human form. It can come when it wants to destroy you. And what it did, it tried to destroy Arnie by having him kill someone. But Ed tried to use the defense through a lawyer that the devil made Arnie do it. The defense was going to be the devil made me kill Alan Bono. And when he got to court, the judge said, No, that's not a legal defense. We don't talk about devils in our courtroom. We go strictly by the law that's written. And what happened was they had a trial, and Arnie was sentenced to 5 years in prison for manslaughter. When he was in prison, he heard a voice saying, "We won. We won." The collection that you see here is things that were collected through many, many years of the investigations of Ed and Lorraine Warren. At one point, like in the early 50s, like 50, 51, he looked at Lorraine, he says, we're collecting all this data. I have all these pictures strewn across the living room floor. I got all these tapes, like he had open reel tape deck and everything. He goes, we got to do something about this. Look at all this stuff that's spread out. Why don't we start a society and organize this stuff a little bit? The museum we're sitting in right here used to be an art studio. This is where Ed used to do his painting and teach art here. He called it the Barn Door Studio. He said to Lorraine, I'm going to change this art studio and make it a museum of haunted objects. A lot of these objects came from either a case or from people who called them up scared, saying, I got this object, Ed, and I don't like it anymore, or something that was used in a satanic ritual or a black witchcraft ritual, and then was finally given over to Ed. The satanic worship idol that's over there was first brought to Ed's attention going back in the 90s, maybe I'm going to say 91, 92. A young man, about 22 years old, he used to hunt with a bow and arrow. He used to hunt deer. He's walking through the woods. He parked his car on the street. He walks through the woods in Sandy Hook, Connecticut. Now he's deep into the woods. He doesn't know where he is. He got lost. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, he sees this grotto of gravel and stonework in a circle, and about that high. And on top of it is this statue with horns made of some kind of ceramic. He didn't know what it was made of. It had black eyes, painted black, horns, kind of a tannish color or brownish color. He said he was like overcome with emotion, like some kind of a weird feeling came over him. And all he could think of to himself was, I gotta get out of this place. Something's not right here. The weird part was as he's walking, there's a man appears right next to him, right to his right side, dressed all in black, from head to toe, black. He's about 70 years old. And he's walking step for step with this young man. Now the young man said, I was so freaked out by this guy. He said, but then I finally got up enough nerve to say, how do I get out of here? How do I get out, sir? And the guy didn't look at him, didn't speak. All the man did was walk step for step and go and point off to the right and then walk off to the right. Now this kid starts double timing it, trying to get to his car. He finally he gets to the street, finds his car. Who's at the car? The guy. This man is waiting at the car, leaning on the car, looking at him. Now the kid's really freaked out. Quickly unlocks his car, gets in the car, takes off, looks in his mirror. The guy's staring all the way down, looking at him as he's driving away. He gets home. He's kind of shaky. Calls his buddies up. They said, call Mr. Warren. We're in Sandy Hook. He lives right in Monroe. It's only a few towns over. Call him up. Calls up Ed and Lorraine. Ed says, you think you can find that statue again? Kid didn't know it was a worship idol. He said, yeah, I think so, Mr. Warren. I'll meet you at such and such a road, and we'll go in. And they walked into the woods with Lorraine and Ed. And as they walk in, he's describing more about the statue, about the man that he met. Ed gets to the statue, and he goes, I know what that is, son. That's a satanic worship idol. That doesn't belong here. I'm taking it with me. Ed puts it in the car, drives it back to the museum here, puts it in the museum. Everything was fine that day. And everything was fine the next day. The third day, Ed's out in the driveway fixing the wipers on his car. He looks back into the driveway and he sees Lorraine watering some flowers. No problem, it's in the summer. And she waves at him, okay, Ed, after you're done, we'll go eat lunch. Ed's like, yep, no problem. Goes back to his wipers. Then he just happens to, like moments later, glance back towards Lorraine. She's no longer there watering flowers. She's like 25 feet farther down the driveway, on the ground, in a fetal position, semi-conscious. Ed runs over to her. Lorraine, what's happened? What's going on? She won't answer him, shaking him. Lorraine, what's the matter? He calls the police. They call an ambulance, bring her to St. Vincent's Hospital in Bridgeport. She's there for 3 days. We went to see her, Judy and I, the next day. She hardly knew who we were. It's like somebody hit her in the head and she had the flu. She just couldn't, like, gather her thoughts. Ed says to the doctors, what's wrong with my wife? We don't know, Mr. Warren. We can't find anything wrong. She's there for 3 days. The third day, she snaps right out of it like nothing's wrong. Hey, I want to go home, Ed. Come on, what's going on? I'm fine. And she was. They released her. She comes home, everything's fine. The next day, I said, Ed, can I come over and look at that statue again? The satanic idol. So we go into the museum here. I'm standing in front of the idol, and I said, Ed, did the doctors ever tell you what happened with Lorraine? He says, no, they never told me because they couldn't find anything wrong. He goes, but I know exactly what happened. That guy dressed in black. He's a high priest in a satanic cult. And he did that to Lorraine to warn me because I stole his idol. He knew to do that to Lorraine to get to me. Well, you know, here is probably one of the most haunted objects in the Occult Museum. It's the Annabelle doll that was collected by Ed and Lorraine Warren back in 1970. There were 2 nurses in Hartford, Connecticut that worked the 4 to 12 shift at Hartford Hospital. And the mom of one of the nurses, Donna, the mom gave Donna this doll that she purchased in a thrift store. And Donna accepted it. Donna liked it. It was for her birthday. And she got the doll and everything was fine. She used to carry it around with her, just like a regular Raggedy Ann doll. But one day, she remembered having the doll on the couch. And she and her roommate went to work on their shift. They came back. The doll's no longer on the couch. It's lying on the bed. And Donna's like, did you move the doll before we left? To the roommate. No, I didn't touch her. They let that slide. Next incident, she is more aware of where she left the doll, and she had the legs crossed on the couch. She comes home, the doll's still on the couch, but the legs are uncrossed. Incidents like that happened more than once, probably 3 or 4 times before they said to themselves, maybe somebody's coming in the house, like this, the superintendent of the apartment. Maybe he's playing a joke on us. So let's do something to find out if anybody comes in here when we're at work. And they took a piece of tape, they put it on the bottom of the doorway. They positioned the rug just so they'd know if someone had disturbed the entryway. They went on to their shift. They came home. The tape is perfect. The rug is perfect. The doll's in a different location. Now they're scratching their heads. They don't know what to think. But one time, though, there was a piece of parchment paper, and written in crayon, it said, help me. It was under the bed. Now the nurses are really perturbed because they didn't have any parchment paper or any crayons in the house. They're at the breakfast nook with the doll. She carried it everywhere. Doll's sitting next to them. As they're having their breakfast, those 2 flimsy arms on that doll levitated onto the table. Now, most people would be like freaked out. I would. They were more intrigued than they were scared. So the roommate says, hey, you know, I know my friend's a psychic. Why don't we have her come over? We'll do a seance, find out what she wants. That night they had a seance, and they all sat around the table, and the psychic started to go into her trance, and she says, I'm sensing the spirit of a young girl, and she was killed outside your apartment complex in a car accident. She's about 6 or 7 years old. Her name is Annabelle, just like that. They believed it. They figured there's really a little girl named Annabelle in that doll, and they started to really treat her more of a human. One day, though, Lou, who was Donna's fiance. He's lying on the couch. Annabelle's on the other end of the couch. He's sleeping. He wakes up with a start. He's hyperventilating. He's holding his neck like this. And Donna's like, "What's the matter, Lou? I just had a nightmare that doll was crawling up my leg, and the doll got to my neck and started strangling me to death." But then he picks up the doll and he throws it across the room. And he says, "That's just a Raggedy Ann doll. That can't hurt anybody." When he said that, 7 psychic wounds appeared on his chest and on his stomach. 4 on his chest, 3 on his stomach. You can see blood oozing from the 7 scratch marks. Now the girls are freaked out because they know that's not something that a 6 or 7-year-old human spirit would do. She called Ed Warren. Ed and Lorraine came out and interviewed the girls, the 2 nurses. They brought a priest in to do an exorcism of the blessing of the girls and an exorcism of the house. And then the girls said, "Well, Mr. Warren, we don't want that doll anymore. We don't want to know about that." He goes, "I'll take it back to my museum. We'll keep it for safekeeping." One night, or one day I should say, a Catholic priest who was a friend of Ed and Lorraine, Father Bill, called up. And he said, "Lorraine, can I come over and show you my new car that I just bought?" She said, "Sure, Father, come on over, we'll have lunch." And they did. Ed and Lorraine sat at the table upstairs with the priest. And then at one point he looked over at Ed and he said, "Ed, can I see that doll that I heard put slashes on people?" Ed says, "Sure, Father, come on down." They brought him down. Ed warned him not to touch anything, which he told everybody not to touch anything. When he got to the Annabelle doll and started to talk about the history, he talked about Lou, about the scratch marks. And when he did that, the priest, it must have been like a trigger went off. The priest reaches over the ropes, picks up the doll, which Ed told him not to touch. Before Ed can even do anything, he throws the doll like Lou did and says, "God is more powerful than any devil or demon." And Ed says, "Father, what are you doing? You shouldn't have touched the doll." They go back upstairs. He says his goodbyes to Lorraine. Everything's fine. He never made it home to the rectory that night. We found out that he went almost head on and then sideswiped a tractor trailer, totaling his new car, brand new. About 2 days later, maybe 3, he calls up, talks to Ed, and he's sobbing on the phone to Ed. And Ed is like, Father Bill, what's the matter?" "I should have listened to you. I shouldn't have touched the doll. The last thing that I can remember is looking in the rearview mirror, and I saw an image of that doll." There was a motorcyclist who came with his girlfriend to see the doll, see the museum. He came with other people who came, a group, about 12 people. And Ed used to charge like $12 and have a 2-hour presentation and a tour, like on a Sunday or Saturday. Now it's in a case. Ed had finally put it in a case back in about 1980, 79, 80. This kid walks up, and there's a rope in front of it. He leans over the rope, he starts banging on the glass, and he says, "This is a bunch of bull. If that doll can put slashes on anybody, do it to me." And Ed said, "Look, you and your girlfriend, you got to go. I can't have that in my museum. I just got through telling you not to touch anything, not to challenge anything. Get out." 3 hours later, the young man was dead. And we found out what happened because the girl that was on a bike, didn't die. The last thing that she could remember was they were laughing and joking about the doll when he lost control of the bike, went head on into a tree, and he was killed instantly. So that's basically a story of our Annabelle doll, which I think, in my opinion, is the most haunted and dangerous object here. When Ed passed in 2006, Lorraine, of course, was still alive, and she said, "Well, we're going to keep everything going, right, Tone?" And I said, "Yeah, we're going to keep the New England Society's name alive, and we're going to keep doing what you guys have already done and always done, is try to help people." So our society, the New England Society for Psychic Research, I took over as director. We carry on the traditions and the work of Ed and Lorraine Warren. We try to get to the core of what happened, and then we try to help the people. Now, how do you do that? How do you do that? It could be through a blessing of the house. It could be through instructions of the family what to do, like what kind of prayers to say, maybe walking through the house with blessed pontifical incense, getting a priest to come in and bless the house. and the people, and also maybe getting, if possible, if needed, an exorcism of the house or of the people, which is the expelling of devils and demons. What this museum actually means to me is over 50 years of hard investigative work by Ed and Lorraine Warren, the pioneers of the paranormal. They were the pioneers. There's only a few people back in the 50s, that did this kind of stuff. This is their deal, this museum. So I want to keep it alive. I want to keep it going. Because Ed would never want me to destroy these objects. He would never want me to sell them. We believe 100% in what we're doing. We know that God exists. We know that the devil exists. How do we know that? Through our evidence, through our investigation, and through our faith, of course. But you know what? There's always a skeptical side. There's always people who say, that's not real. I'm not here to prove to you that the devil is real or God is real. I'm just showing you our society. We're just showing you our evidence. We're telling you what we heard, what we saw, what we learned through our investigations. You could either believe it or not believe it, but we're here to give you a warning that the devil is real and don't dabble in occult practices. So you can't say because you can't see something, it's not there. And Ed used to say to me, I never met an atheist in a haunted house. And I used to say, what do you mean by that, Ed? They turn to religion real quick. You could be a skeptic all you want. You can remain skeptical all you want, right? Until it happens to you. And it could.